there are those who have scared this community into thinking that the children in this system would be mass bused from one end of the community to the other. This is not the case. It has never been the case and will not be the case.
WBTV News presents Swann versus the Board of Education, 10 years after. Reported by WBTV News correspondent Kathy Moore.
10 years ago, a lawsuit, Swann versus the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education, was filed in federal district court in Charlotte. This is where our story begins. It is a story of confusion and chaos, of legal battles and political power plays, of violence and protest, and of growth and tolerance, as a large southern school system became the first school district in the nation to be massively desegregated.
Kids' education.
Today, the schools are not separate, nor are they equal, nor are they all truly integrated. Changes have come, but few could have foreseen what the impact would be that January day in 1965 when Julius Chambers filed what became a landmark case. After a steady gain in students up to 1969-70, when the system reached an all-time peak of more than 83,500, there are only about 77,000 students enrolled in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg school system today. That figure's down 1,000 students from just last year. At the same time, the population of Charlotte and Mecklenburg has increased by more than 40,000 people since 1969. So, despite a county-wide population growth, the public school enrollment continues to decrease. Reasons for the decrease range from white flight to avoid busing to fewer children as a result of the lower birth rate. For whatever reasons, however, the lessening student population has hurt the school system in terms of teacher allotment and monetary support. As for busing, well over half the system's students ride buses to school, though not necessarily the result of court-ordered desegregation. How much money has been spent on busing for desegregation is said by school officials to be undeterminable. While some educators segregate students, the students often segregate themselves. When students are given the choice of where to sit, in classrooms, in lunchrooms, in the library, they generally sit with their own race.
They want to sit with their friends, and maybe a few of them, have friends of the other races, but they just don't want to break away from their crowd and go and sit with the other race because of what their friends may say.
Principals say students really don't have the time to develop new friends, but the administrators say if students get the chance to mix in extracurricular activities, blacks and whites get along together well. But the chances for mixing don't come along very often, principals say, as many students have to give up opportunities for extracurricular activities at many schools in exchange for a bus ride home. One opportunity for mixing of students came at a local high school in December. But even as the students were intermixed on the stage, their friends, for the most part, remained segregated in the audience. The most prevalent mixing of students is in athletics. Principals are especially pleased when they have good athletic teams because a winning team, they say, rallies support for the school from both parents and students.
I believe that sports is really getting blacks and white together because, you need to work as a unit to get something done.
Oftentimes when you go to basketball games, though, you'll see blacks and whites sitting separately in the stands. Why is that?
Well, I believe that's how the cheering goes, separate. They cheer their way in, the others cheer their way.
But even as black and white students play together, officiated by black and white referees, High school games throughout the city and county are basically viewed by blacks and whites segregated in the stands. Often, blacks and whites do different cheers for the same team at the same time. While some school officials express concern over the students' self-segregation, they are quick to point out that students, black and white, have grouped themselves socioeconomically for years, and they say much of the same socioeconomic grouping goes on in schools today. 10 years after Swann was originally filed, there is still a mixed air in Charlotte-Mecklenburg over desegregation. There is optimism. Top administrators are encouraged by the positive changes desegregation has brought. They are pleased over the makeup of the new school board. They are anxious for Judge McMillan to get his diploma from the school system so that educators, not the courts, can get about the business of running the schools. The administrators are encouraged by what they call a more positive look at the schools from the news media in town, and they feel that blacks and whites are overcoming many of their original fears about racial mixing. There is pessimism. Many wonder if a national policy on desegregation will be established, and if it is, what it will mean to Charlotte-Mecklenburg. Many wonder what a rising black ratio in the public schools means to the system and the community. And there is some question as to where Swann versus the Board of Education 10 years after has brought the school system. As one top administrator put it, Rocky Haters are concerned about the schools and about Charlotte-Mecklenburg, specifically whether the community will assume some of the responsibility the schools have had to carry. Almost every person we talked to criticized the community leadership, what they called the power structure of Charlotte, for abandoning the schools in their years of need. Most people admitted that backroom political pressures were applied to school officials or board members over the decade of Swann, but for the most part, community leaders remained publicly silent. Commerce. And 10 years after Swann, most school officials resent the fact that the schools have had to handle the problems of desegregation, while the community at large still remains segregated.
Well, I guess the role of the schools in this particular regard is one of leadership. If it works in the schools and if it becomes meaningful in the schools, that perhaps it will set an example for the rest of the community.